She sneaked into the wrong keep, and the Alpha King's wolf decided she was staying. I had been king of Ardenmoor for 43 years, and in all that time, my wrist had never done a single interesting thing. It sat at the end of my arm, as wrists do. It held my signet ring on the days I remembered to wear it. It had been bitten by a particularly opinionated hound in my 29th year, which left a small scar that my physician had documented with more enthusiasm than the wound warranted. Otherwise, nothing. No mark, no mate pull, no faint warmth in the night that would have told any wolf in the kingdom, this one. This is the one your heart was made for. My council had opinions about this. They had been sharing those opinions, in rotating shifts, for the better part of 4 decades. Lord Castle held that I simply needed to attend more festivals. Lord Payne believed the problem was that I did not smile enough at appropriate moments. Lady Voreth, who was 81 and had buried 2 husbands and was enjoying her 3rd, told me every winter solstice that I was too particular, that the moon goddess distributed fated mates the same way she distributed weather, without consulting anyone's preferences, and that I should stop looking for lightning and simply go stand outside more often. I had tried, in my younger years, to explain that one cannot simply stand outside and wait for destiny. Lady Voreth had looked at me the way she looked at everyone who said something she considered obvious and wrong. "Can't you?" she had said, and gone back to her wine. 43 years. The keep of Ardenmoor sat above the river bend in the gray inland country, fog in the mornings, stone walls that held the cold the way stone holds everything, without complaint and without warmth. The great hall had a runner of woven red and gold down its center that caught every heel that was not paying attention. The east wing housed the laundry, the stores, and the servants' quarters, and was separated from the rest of the keep by a corridor that turned twice and was notoriously easy to misread in poor light, which was most light in Ardenmoor between the months of October and March. It was a Tuesday in November. The fog that morning was the particular kind that turns every fork in a path into a question, and every familiar gate into a guess. I was in my private receiving chamber, a smaller room off the great hall, used for the conversations a king has that do not require an audience and a throne, working through a stack of land dispute correspondence that I had been avoiding since September. My wolf was quiet. My wolf was always quiet, in the particular way of a creature that has given up expecting anything and settled into a long, dignified, slightly melancholy patience. I had stopped asking it questions in my early 30s. The silence between us had become simply the texture of things, like the fog and the cold, and the correspondence I was always a month behind on. The door opened. I looked up. The young woman in the doorway was not anyone I had ever seen before. She was small and fog-damp, wrapped in an apprentice's plain wool, carrying a bundle of linen cloth that was nearly as large as she was. She had dark hair escaping from a knot at her neck. There was ink on 3 of her fingers and a small smear of it on her jaw that I suspected she was unaware of. Her eyes, which were the brown of river water when the light comes through it sideways, were fixed on me with an expression that I can only describe as a person who has just understood that they are in entirely the wrong place and is still hoping, very much, that they are not. She did not say anything. I did not say anything. "Oh," she said finally. "Oh, I apologize. I took there was a fork and the fog." She stopped, started again. "I was looking for the east servants' gate with the linen." She held the bundle up slightly as though presenting it as evidence of her innocence. "For the east gate." "This," I said carefully, "is the private receiving chamber." "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can see that now." My wolf, which had been asleep for approximately 4 decades, opened one eye. "I noticed this the way you notice a sound in a house that has been silent so long you had assumed silence was simply the house's natural state. A kind of internal shift, a stirring, the creature in my chest lifting its head with an expression, if a wolf can have an expression of cautious, almost suspicious attention. I kept my face still. I was very good at keeping my face still. 43 years of kingship had given me a face that revealed nothing unless I chose, and at that moment I chose to reveal nothing at all, because the alternative was revealing that something had just happened inside me that I did not have a ready explanation for. "The East Gate," I said, "is 3 corridors that way." I indicated the direction. "You take the second turn, not the first." "The second," she repeated, nodding. She was still in the doorway. She had not moved. Her eyes were moving, though very quickly, in the manner of someone conducting a rapid internal inventory of the current situation, and finding it substantially worse than the inventory she had conducted 30 seconds ago. "I also," she said, and I noticed she was wincing slightly, "seem to be standing on your threshold. I'm not sure I can move backward without the bundle is very," she shifted it. The bundle shifted with her. Several things inside it began to drift in different directions. "I should have called a servant." That was the correct response. A servant arrives, collects the misplaced young woman, escorts her to the East Gate, the door closes, and I return to the September correspondence. The thing in my chest settles. The wolf goes back to its long and dignified patience. What I said instead was, "Come in before you drop it." She came in. She got 3 steps inside the door, which brought her to approximately the position of the signet table. A heavy oak piece that had been in the receiving chamber longer than I had, placed, as my father had placed it, at the exact spot that every visitor took 2 steps past before remembering it was there. She hit it with her toe. The bundle, which had been balanced through some combination of determination and faith, lost both. I watched linen unfurl across my receiving chamber floor with the slow, unhurried grace of an event that cannot be stopped and must simply be witnessed. Several pieces caught the air and settled on the far chair. One draped itself over the corner of the window seat. The last and largest came to rest at my feet. The young woman stood in the middle of it all, very still, with the expression of someone who has just watched their situation pass through several stages of bad and arrive at a destination considerably beyond what they had anticipated. "I'm so sorry," she said. "It's fine," I said. "It isn't," she said. "It truly, genuinely isn't, and I'm so sorry, and I'll collect it all in one moment." And she bent to gather the nearest piece, and the knot in her hair gave way, which added her hair to the general situation. She straightened, holding several pieces of linen and a substantial quantity of her own hair, and looked at me with the expression of a person who has decided that if the floor is not going to open and swallow them, they will simply have to continue. My wolf was not just awake, my wolf was standing up. My wolf was doing something it had not done in 4 decades, which was leaning forward with an attention that I can only describe as arrested. The quality of absolute stillness that a creature has when it has seen something it was not expecting and is not yet certain what to do about it. I was a king. I had been a king for 43 years. I had faced 2 border disputes, 1 attempted succession, 3 floods, a plague of rats in the grain stores in my 31st year, and Lord Castle's opinion about my attendance at festivals. I did not lose my composure. I said, "Let me help you." She blinked. "You're the king," she said, as though this was information she felt I might have forgotten. "I'm aware of that." "You don't, kings don't." "I'm helping you gather your linen," I said, "because the alternative is watching you attempt to do it alone, and from what I've seen of the last 2 minutes, that will result in someone losing an eye." She stared at me for a moment, then very quietly she laughed. I had not expected that. In 43 years, most people who found themselves unexpectedly in my private receiving chamber managed a great deal of apology and a great deal of anxiety and very little laughter. It was a small laugh, quickly caught and bitten back, the laugh of someone who has just recognized that the situation is objectively absurd and has not yet decided whether they are allowed to find it funny. But it was genuine, and it changed her face in a way that did something to the space behind my ribs that I had no immediate word for. We gathered the linen. It took longer than it should have because we kept reaching for the same piece from opposite directions and then reorganizing the approach. She apologized to the signet table. She said this while she was picking linen off the floor, and it was clearly automatic, the apology of someone who apologizes to furniture on instinct. And she didn't realize she'd said it until she saw my expression, and then she pressed her lips together very hard and looked at the floor. "It's been in this spot for 60 years, I told her. "Everyone hits it. My father hit it, I hit it. Lord Castle hit it so badly in my 12th year that he had to be helped back to his chambers. You are in excellent company." She looked up at me. "Lord Castle," she said carefully, "is a very large man." "He is. And he hit a table." With considerable feeling. The laugh came back. This time she did not catch it in time. My wolf inside my chest did something I could not categorize. It was not a howl. It was not a surge, the way I had read that the Maypole arrived in the old accounts, sudden and overwhelming, a thing that knocked a wolf off his feet. It was quieter than that. It was the sensation of something that has been wound very tight for a very long time releasing, slowly, with a sound like a door settling on its frame after years of being held shut against the draft. A recognition, a certainty arriving not like lightning but like light, the kind that comes gradually, that you realize is there only when you notice you can see. I became aware of my wrist. It is difficult to explain how a thing you have not thought about in a decade suddenly commands your entire attention, but that is the only honest account I can give. My left wrist, the inside of it, where a faded mate mark will burn into a wolf's skin when he is in the presence of the one the moon goddess made for him. I had stopped checking it in my early 30s. I had stopped thinking about it not long after that. It was burning. Not the angry, acute burn of damage. The burn of warmth, of something igniting that had been waiting for fuel for a very long time, and had finally found it. She was still talking. She had gathered most of the linen into a reasonable bundle, and was explaining, with great sincerity and some detail, the precise nature of the fog that morning and the way the path to the east gate forked at a point that was genuinely ambiguous in low light. She had not noticed my wrist. She had not noticed that I was no longer listening to what she was saying precisely, but was listening to the way she said it, the cadence of her voice, quick and honest, the way she used her hands to indicate the fog's behavior, the way she talked to the situation she was in as though it was a problem she fully intended to solve. I looked at my wrist. The mark was faint, new, just arriving, but it was there. A curve of silver pale against my skin, the shape the mate mark always takes in its first moments, before the bond between two wolves fully settles and the mark deepens. I had not seen it in 43 years of looking. Now it was here. Now it was present. Now it was entirely, undeniably real. And the woman who had caused it was apologizing to me for the inconvenience of her linen and the ambiguity of the fog. I said nothing for a moment. She wound down eventually, too. "So I'm very sorry, and I'll take all of this to the East Gate immediately, and I promise you will never see me again." "That," I said, "may be difficult." She looked at me, puzzled. She had her bundle gathered. She had straightened her hair as best she could. She looked like someone who had survived a situation through sheer force of determined dignity, and was now ready to retreat and spend the rest of the week in something she preferred not to think about. "Why would it be difficult?" she said. I held up my wrist. She looked at it. She looked at me. She looked back at the wrist. "That's a..." She stopped. "Yes. That's a mate mark." "It is." "That is a mate mark on the wrist of the King of Ardenmore." "It is." "And that mark," she said, very slowly, as though she was working through each step of a problem she had not expected to find at the end of this particular Tuesday, "it just appeared." "Just now, yes." She was quiet for a long moment. "When did it appear?" she said. "Approximately when you knocked over my table." Another silence. She said. "Yes. I caused the King of Ardenmoor's mate Mark to appear. That is my current understanding of events." She looked at the bundle of linen in her arms. She looked at my wrist. She looked at the signet table, which had apparently played a more significant role in the morning's events than anyone had anticipated. Then she sat down, carefully, on the floor of my private receiving chamber, because there was no chair within convenient reach, and her knees had clearly made a decision independently of her. "Oh," she said very quietly. "Yes," I agreed. Her name was Wren. She was 24 years old. She had been apprenticed to the keep's laundry mistress for 3 years, having come from a village 2 hours to the east where her family ran a tanning business, and where she had, by her own account, been somewhat better at arriving in the right places. She had a talent for small, precise needlework, an unfortunate tendency to talk to inanimate objects when under stress, and an ability to make very accurate assessments of complex situations that she consistently delivered with more honesty than tact. I learned all of this over the next hour, because once I had helped her up from the floor and settled her into the chair that should have been within reach in the first place, she talked the way some people do when they are processing something enormous, not to fill the silence, but because the talking was the processing, and the processing was not yet complete. I let her talk. My wolf was not quiet anymore and would not be quiet again, and I found I did not mind. The mate bond is not a simple thing to explain to someone who is not a wolf. I had grown up understanding it the way any wolf does, as the moon goddess's great gift, the pull that says to a wolf's soul, "Here. This person. The one your heart was shaped for before either of you existed." But knowing it intellectually, and sitting across from it in a room where the linen was still not entirely gathered, was a different experience. She felt it too, I could tell. Not the same way I did her wolf if she had one was quieter, newer to the idea, but the bond works on both sides, regardless of the strength of either wolf, and I watched her become gradually aware of it the way you watch light change in a room when the clouds shift. Slowly, then all at once. She stopped talking mid-sentence about the fog. "I feel something," she said. "Yes. She pressed her hand over her sternum. "It's like a warmth here." "That's the bond settling," I said. "It takes time. It won't overwhelm you. It's more like," I tried to find the right word, "like a fire that's been cold for a long time, and someone has finally lit it." She was quiet, feeling it. Her eyes were doing something complicated. "I'm a laundress's apprentice," she said finally. "I know. I took the wrong door. I know. In fog. I know. And the moon goddess," she said, very carefully, as though she was still not certain she had the facts straight, decided that this was the moment. "It appears so. On a Tuesday." "In November," I agreed. She looked at the ceiling of my private receiving chamber for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "You're very calm about this," she said. "I've been waiting for 43 years, I said. "I have had some time to prepare." "I've had," she said, "about 40 minutes. How are you finding it?" She considered this seriously. "I knocked over your table," she said. "I sat on your floor. I'm fairly certain there's still ink on my face from this morning. This is not how I imagined." She stopped, started again. "I didn't imagine it. I didn't let myself imagine it. When you're a laundress's apprentice with ink on your fingers, you don't," it seemed unkind, "to imagine." Something shifted behind my ribs. "Wren," I said. "Yes. I have ink on my hand from the correspondence I was working on when you came in. I haven't mentioned it because I assumed you didn't need any more information at the moment. But the point is that the ink is not a relevant distinction between us." She looked at my hand. There was, in fact, ink on 3 of my fingers from the land dispute correspondence. She stared at this for a moment. Then she began to laugh, and this time she didn't catch it at all. The difficulty, once the immediate situation had been absorbed, was my counsel. Not Wren's difficulty, mine. She was, it emerged, entirely prepared to absorb the situation and deal with it with the same practical directness she appeared to bring to all situations, including fog-related navigation failures and the behavior of heavy signet tables. My difficulty was that I had spent 43 years with a counsel that had developed, over those 43 years, a very specific picture of what my eventual fated mate would look like when she arrived, and a laundress's apprentice with ink on her jaw who had entered the private receiving chamber via wrong door was not, broadly speaking, what they had been preparing for. Lord Castle was the one who handled the news worst. He had been angling, for the better part of a decade, toward a particular alliance with a noble family from the Eastern Highland Territories, and had a candidate in mind who was everything he considered appropriate. Accomplished, well-connected, beautifully presented, and capable of entering a room via the correct door under all weather conditions. He handled the news of my mate Mark with what I can only describe as a studied effort to find an alternative explanation. The mark, he said when I showed him, could be a. It is a mate mark, Lord Castle. The light in this room is. You can see it. I can see something. It appeared, I said, in the presence of a specific person. It has not disappeared in the 6 hours since. I have checked. He looked at Wren, who was standing beside me with the expression of someone who has decided to simply be wherever she finds herself and make the best of it. She had fresh clothes, I had sent for them, and her hair was up. The ink was gone from her jaw. She looked, in the way she always looked, like someone who was paying close attention to everything around her, and had not yet decided what to do with most of it. She's the keep laundress's apprentice, Castle said. She was, I said. She is now my fated mate. She came through the wrong door. She did. In fog. Yes. Lord Castle looked at me with an expression that was working very hard to be neutral and not entirely succeeding. The moon goddess, he said slowly, chose a laundress's apprentice who cannot navigate in November. The moon goddess, I said, chose my mate. The rest is details. Wren beside me made a very small sound. I did not look at her, but I felt the bond shift in response, a small warmth, a flicker. I heard Lady Voreth, who was 81 and had buried 2 husbands and was enjoying her third, say from the back of the room, I told you to go stand outside. There were things to be managed, as there always are when a fated mate bond arrives after 4 decades of absence. The formal recognition, the ceremony in which a king presents his fated mate to his court and the bond is witnessed, could not wait for a convenient season. The mate mark does not permit that kind of procrastination. Once the bond has settled, it deepens quickly, and the moon goddess's design, as Lady Voreth had been pointing out for 20 years, is not interested in anyone's convenience. We had 3 days. In those 3 days, Wren met my household, was introduced to the keep's traditions, was shown the parts of the building she had not yet accidentally entered, and was given a thorough explanation of the formal recognition ceremony by my steward, who had never conducted one in my reign, and approached the task with a combination of great enthusiasm and moderate anxiety. She was, throughout all of this, herself. That is the only adequate description. She asked questions. She asked good questions, the kind that suggested she had been listening carefully and had noticed things that others had not mentioned. She talked to Lord Castle as though he were an ordinary person with an ordinary concern, which disarmed him so thoroughly that by the 2nd day he had stopped trying to find alternative explanations for my wrist and had started asking her, somewhat tentatively, about the quality of the keep's linen management and whether improvements could be made. She told him with great specificity that the east corridor needed better lighting. Lord Castle, who had hit the signet table in his youth and had never forgotten it, agreed. She did not know, I think, how much it cost her to walk through those 3 days, to be seen by every lord and lady in the keep, every servant and guard, every person who had known her as the apprentice in the East Wing who apologized to furniture and had very reliable ink stains. She did not let it show. But I knew, because the bond shows you what the other person is feeling whether or not they choose to name it, and what I felt from her side of it was the specific, contained bravery of someone who has decided to be wherever they are and will not let anyone see that being there is difficult. On the evening of the second day, I found her in the East Corridor, not far from the wrong door she had come through. "You don't have to stay in the formal wing," she said. "I know the East Corridor. I know where it goes." "I thought you might like the company," I said. She looked at the corridor. She looked at the door at the end of it, the door she had taken instead of the one that led to the East Servants' Gate. "I've been thinking," she said, "about that door, the fork in the path in the fog and the wrong turn. I've been trying to decide whether to be grateful or mortified. And I keep landing on grateful," she said, "which seems unfair somehow. I knocked over your table. I sat on your floor. I hadn't been introduced to most of the lords in that room until today, and I'm fairly certain Lord Castle still thinks the fog took advantage of a structural problem in the path, and the mark is a coincidence. Lord Castle will come around." He agreed with me about the corridor lighting. He did. That may be the most diplomatically significant thing that has happened in 3 days. I laughed. It surprised me, not the laughter itself, but the ease of it. I had not been a man known for laughing easily. 43 years of kingship has a way of taking the ease out of things. But with her, in the East Corridor, with the fog outside the window and the familiar cold of the stone, it was easy. "Wren," I said. "Yes." "I have been waiting," I said, "for 43 years. The moon goddess sent you through the wrong door. I am choosing to consider this evidence that she has a personality." She looked at me for a moment. "You're very certain," she said. "About you, yes. You've known me for 3 days. The bond has known you longer than I have," I said. "That is rather the point of fated mates. My wolf has been waiting 43 years. When it finally recognized you, it was not tentative about it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My wolf, whatever it is, whatever I have, it knew too. When I was sitting on your floor, before I understood what was happening, something in me just settled, like it had been waiting and didn't know it was waiting and now it could stop." "Yes," I said. "That's it exactly." She looked at the door at the end of the corridor. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," I agreed. "And then you'll be Luna of Ardenmoor, and the court will have to find something else to worry about." "Lord Castle will find something. He always does. It's his best quality." The recognition ceremony was held in the Great Hall, which could hold the full court of Ardenmoor and frequently was required to. And the runner of red and gold ran from the door to the front, and I stood at the far end of it with my steward, and the court assembled on both sides, and I watched her come through the doors. She was wearing the Luna's formal dress, which the keep seamstresses had worked 3 days to prepare and which had been made, by some quiet and thoughtful decision I had not been consulted on, in the particular shade of deep gray that was Wren's own color. Not the ceremonial gold, not the red of the house, but a gray that caught the light the way river water does, the color of fog clearing. She walked toward me with the particular gravity of someone who is concentrating very hard on walking, and has a great deal invested in the outcome. She caught the runner. Not badly, a slight stumble, recovered immediately, her chin up before the sound of it had fully reached the assembled lords, her hand not going out, her pace not breaking. She recovered it the way she recovered everything, without drama, without apology, with the small specific dignity of a person who has decided that the situation does not get to define them. I heard from somewhere in the assembly a sound that might have been Lord Castle making a small, brief noise that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. She reached me. She looked up at me. "The runner," she said very quietly. "I know," I said. "I want it noted," she said equally quietly, "that I recovered immediately." The entire court agrees. Does Lord Castle agree? Lord Castle, I said, is recalling his own history with this room and is feeling very collegial about the whole thing. She laughed quietly and I took her hand, and the mate mark on my wrist, fully settled now, dark and clear and permanent, warmed, and something in the hall went still. Not the quiet of a room waiting, the quiet of a room that has just understood something. The assembled lords and ladies and servants of Ardenmore, who had watched their king stand at the end of that runner for 43 years, who had watched him run through the motions of a court that was waiting for something it had begun to believe would never arrive. They felt it, the way any pack feels the mate bond when it settles completely. A warmth, a rightness, a settling of the whole hall's breath. I spoke the formal words. They are old words, as old as Ardenmore, and they are simple. I claim this woman as my fated mate, before the moon goddess and before my pack, and I give her my protection and my devotion for all the days I am given. She is Luna of Ardenmore. Wren held my gaze through all of it. Her eyes were the brown of river water when the light comes through it sideways, and they were bright, and her hand in mine was steady. She spoke her words, the Luna's words, quieter, older, and her voice did not shake. The hall bowed. Not slowly, not reluctantly, not the bow of a court that is obeying a convention. The bow of a pack that has felt the bond settle and knows what it means. Lords who had spent 3 days quietly debating the significance of fog and coincidence bowed to a woman who had taken the wrong door and apologized to a signet table and sat on the floor of the private receiving chamber, and they meant it. Lady Vorith, 81, did not bow. She had a knee that had not cooperated since her 63rd year. But she caught my eye from across the hall and held up her wine in a gesture that said, very plainly, "I told you to stand outside." After the ceremony, after the formal dinner and the presentations and the conversations that will run for a week and eventually resolve into the new ordinary, we walked back through the East Corridor. Not for any particular reason, she knew the corridor, and I was learning it, and it was quieter than the great hall where lords were still congratulating each other on the significance of the day. She stopped at the fork, the one the path made in the fog, reproduced inside, a subtle thing, easy to miss in poor light, the place where a person with a large bundle of linen and a fog-damp morning could reasonably take the wrong branch. She looked at both branches. "Second turn," she said, "not the first." "Yes. That's where the East Servants' Gate is. That's where it's been for 60 years. She looked at the correct branch for a long moment. Then she looked at the one she had taken. "I'm glad," she said quietly, "that the fog was heavy." I took her hand. The mate mark was warm under her fingers when she touched it. She had taken to doing this, in quiet moments, as though she was still confirming it was real, that it had not faded, that the Tuesday in November had actually happened, and was not a particularly vivid dream in which she had knocked over a king's signet table and been forgiven for it. It had not faded. It would not fade. The moon goddess does not give a thing like this and then take it back. "Wren," I said. "Yes." "Tomorrow Lord Castle is going to present you with a proposal regarding the East Corridor lighting." She looked up at me. "Already?" "He's been drafting it since yesterday. I suspect it's quite thorough." "He's been thinking about that table for 30 years, she said. "I believe so." She smiled. It was the smile she had, the one that changed her face the way light changes a room, not dramatically, not all at once, but completely, so that you looked at her and found the room had become a different room without your noticing the shift. Tell him, she said, that I'll read it carefully. I will. And tell him, she paused. Tell him the table should stay where it is. It's been there 60 years, it's part of the keep. I looked at her. It brought you through the wrong door, she said. I'm not moving it. I had been king for 43 years. I had held a court and managed a territory and run a correspondence that was always a month behind and attended, under duress, Lord Castle's recommended festivals. I had done all of it with a bare wrist and a wolf that had grown so quiet I had stopped listening for it. I had done it well, I believed, and I had done it alone. I was not alone anymore. The fog in the morning would still come. The stone would still hold the cold. The runner in the great hall would catch another heel before the season was out, and Lord Castle would send his thorough report about the East Corridor lighting, and the land dispute correspondence would continue to accumulate on the desk in the private receiving chamber, where a small young woman had once appeared in the wrong doorway, and looked at me with the expression of someone who had understood exactly where they were and was hoping, very much, that the floor would swallow them whole. The floor had not swallowed her. The moon goddess had sent her through the fog and through the wrong fork and through the wrong door, and through a signet table that had been inconveniently placed for 60 years, and my wolf, which had been patient and quiet and dignified for a very long time, had known her the moment she walked in. I thought about that sometimes, about the 43 years before, and about how they had led, by whatever winding path fate takes when it is working towards something, to a Tuesday in November when a woman with ink-stained fingers and a bundle of linen had taken the wrong turn in the fog and changed everything. I thought about it on the morning after the ceremony, when I woke to the mate mark warm on my wrist, and the bond settled and quiet around me like the kind of quiet that is not empty but full of her, full of the knowledge of her, full of the certainty that wherever she was in the keep, she was there, and the wolf in my chest that had waited for 43 years had finally come home. She had left a note on the table beside the window. She was an early riser, I was learning this, and she had been up before the fog lifted, and she had left, in the small neat hand she used for laundry records and, apparently, for notes to kings, gone to speak with the laundry mistress about the handover of my duties, back before you finished your correspondence. There was an ink smudge on the corner of the page where she had rested her hand. I kept the note. The corridor was given better lighting before the winter was out. Lord Castle presented his report, and Wren read it carefully, and they had 3 meetings about it that I was not invited to, and that produced, by all accounts, a remarkably thorough proposal for lantern placement along both branches of the east wing's interior fork. It was the beginning of a working partnership that would eventually extend to a full review of the keep's infrastructure, which Lord Castle approached with great enthusiasm, and Wren approached with the same practical directness she brought to everything. She did not move the signet table. It stayed where it had been for 60 years, at the exact spot that every visitor took 2 steps past before remembering it was there. Lord Castle hit it twice more in the years that followed, and each time he did, he looked at it with an expression that was not quite exasperation and not quite fondness, and I suspect he understood by the end that it had earned its place. The runner in the great hall stayed too. On a Tuesday in November every year, I could find Wren standing at the wrong door in the east corridor, the one that led to my private receiving chamber, looking at it with an expression I had come to know well, the expression of someone who has decided to be grateful and is still finding new reasons for it. The fog was heavy that morning, she told me once when I came to stand beside her. It was, I agreed. I couldn't see the fork at all, she said. I know. She looked at the door. Good, she said. And she took my hand, and the mate mark was warm, and in my chest the wolf that had waited for 43 years was quiet in the only way that matters, the way of something that is complete, and settled, and entirely, exactly where it is supposed to be.